All right, we'll go ahead and get started as people trickle in. Um, my name is Garrett Chase. I'm the new program manager with Texas Gun Sense. Thank you all for joining. This is a really timely conversation. We're really excited to have our speakers here. They are all student activists and educators that have really great insights on this topic of school safety as it pertains to gun violence prevention in particular. Um, I'm going to pass it off here in just a second to Millen, our Texas Gun Sense policy intern that has started recently. Um, before I do, Texas Gun Sense is really gearing up for the legislative session in 2025. So I'm going to go ahead and drop our support link for donations in the chat. If anyone is able to support our work, send it to friends, share it on social media. We would greatly appreciate it. It takes a lot to get this work done and working with our coalition. So we are excited to continue fundraising after our event and get ready for the legislative session and advocacy day. Um, so I'm going to pass it off to Millen. Millen is a junior at UT Austin, double majoring in Plan 2 honors and philosophy with a minor in Italian. He's the policy intern for Texas Gun Sense and the moderator for today's webinar. He recently interned with Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher and worked with the U.S. Department of State on AI research. In his free time, he enjoys sports, cooking, and spending time with his dogs. Millen, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Garrett. Yes, so as Garrett mentioned, my name is Millen. I am currently in Austin at the University of Texas. Love it, but originally I'm from Houston. And so being in Houston, I think kind of, for me at least, shaped my experience with getting into the gun violence prevention advocacy sphere. I became involved with Students Demand Action around 2018, 2019, a little bit after the Parkland shooting, when I was in eighth, ninth grade. And then in 10th grade, unfortunately, there was a shooting at my high school. I went to Beller High School in Houston, Texas. And there was a shooting at my high school. And I think that kind of really struck me because I realized as much as transformative as the work that we were doing, prior, I realized that like gun violence prevention advocacy has to be proactive and not just reactive. Otherwise, you can kind of get like nipped in the butt, just like we did. And it was really it was striking, and it forced like a reckoning within me. And so as we have this conversation today about school safety, one of the things that I really took away from the tragedy of my high school was the fact that my principal and other educators helped facilitate the conversations around school safety in the aftermath by leveraging students and other like various stakeholders at the school at the table. And that was really, really valuable. And so we were able to do a lot with the Houston Independent School District to basically get safe storage information passed around to parents and faculty every single year when they're sending out the code of conduct and other kind of socioeconomic forums at the beginning of the year. And so that only really happened because students were able to be at the table and students were able to talk about how they felt in school, what was important to them, and what educators and policymakers could do to make school a safer place for them. It is so important to hear from young people and educators because the fact of the matter is, for some students who, for example, go to school from 8 to 4, they're spending most of their waking hours and day at school. And so, in essence, it should be a haven. It should be like an institution for safety and purity and like growth and development, and not one where safety could be jeopardized for anyone who's there. So we have four wonderful speakers today across the student spectrum and the educator spectrum as well. First, we have Abby Clements. She is the executive director and co-founder of Teachers Unify to End Gun Violence. We also have Sneha Kesavan, co-founder of UT Austin Students Demand Action, and also an executive council member on Team Enough through the Brady Center. We also have Carrie Griffith, who is a policy specialist at the Texas State Teachers Association and National Education Association. And finally, we have Sami Beg, a Giffords Courage Fellow and a voting member of the Harris County Safe Schools Commission. So first, what I kind of want to do is pass this off to Abby Clements. So as I mentioned, Abby Clements is the executive director and co-founder of Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence. A survivor of the Sandy Hook tragedy and a 30-year educator, she's been a passionate gun advocate for gun violence prevention ever since. And she's also worked as a strategic consultant for the ATF and held leadership roles with Moms Demand Action. So I'll pass this off to Abby Clements. And thank you for speaking, Abby.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Texas Gun Sense. And it's an honor to be here and also to be among such incredible activists here. And thank you to those of you who joined us today. I was a teacher. I've always been a teacher. I've been a teacher for 32 years. It's just who I was. I had summers off to rejuvenate, and then I'd like go back and do it again. And we moved here to Newtown, Connecticut. And I was so excited to actually live in the same town where I taught for the first time. And this is going to be great. My kids are all in the same district, and we have the same vacations, and it's going to be great. I was always somebody who voted. I was always somebody who took issues in crisis seriously, attended a bunch of protests in my 20s. Um, but everything changed for me as like somebody who paid attention to then somebody who was activated on December 14th, 2012 on a cold Friday when I went to school like any other day, stopped at the office to talk to my principal about the overlooked an important piece of teaching, which is rapport. And I was uplifting another teacher who had taught my son the year before, and I was saying how we had this great conversation, the principal and I, on the last day she was alive, about how that's overlooked. She grabbed her iPad, we walked together, and she dropped me off to my classroom, which was the second room on the right, and she proceeded to go to the conference room. A few minutes later, the perpetrator shot his way through into my beautiful New England quaint elementary school, and he turned left instead of right, where I was with my second grade students who are now in their sophomore year of college and who are watching gun violence ravage families and communities every single day. And I knew after the tragedy, even though I had a lot to work through in terms of like moving forward after such a horrible thing, the intense grief and um, trying to hold it together for my own family, and then the thought of having to go back to some location to be there with my students for a whole other 6 months of the school year. But I knew that I was going to get involved in that. It was just a matter of like I kept our daughter was the one who led the family into gun violence prevention. She was 16 at the time and in lockdown in physics class and didn't know for a minute if I was okay. And she too always like kind of had a knack for policy and politics, and she paid attention, and we watched the news and all of that. And anyway, so she led the family, and I kept telling her, "I'll be there. I'll just give me. I gotta be able to like function and follow you," which is exactly what I did. And I found Moms Demand Action, and that's where I met Nicole. We've known each other for a very long time. And I cherish those years with Moms Demand Action. It really taught me how to kind of combine my teaching and advocacy together. I became a trainer for a while, actually helped create those trainings. And I loved working with passionate people who were just trying to figure out any way to help make a change. And I just knew that was my path. It was empowering to me to like be in the space of survivors and activists who just will do anything, even small little things that sometimes don't feel like anywhere nearly enough, but you kind of go through that process together. So that was pretty much my journey for a decade after surviving Sandy Hook. Just to kind of also mention that they rebuilt the school on the same site, and I couldn't imagine driving up that driveway that they kept, even though we asked them to change the driveway. So I transferred to another school in the same district. because teachers don't actually have a lot of choices when it comes to this kind of thing. If they need to have a different space after something terrible happens. But I continued teaching and I worked with Moms Demand Action for a very long time. However, I was missing one thing, and that was organizing teachers on this issue. It was just like the one thing that was missing. I mean, I would occasionally meet a teacher and it would be great, but I was very confused as to why there wasn't a national organization solely organizing teachers on this issue. And I was waiting, I would talk about it, I was waiting, I would talk about it. And then finally, there was yet another school shooting. Um, it was almost 3 years ago in Oxford, Michigan, at Oxford High School. And I was in a group chat with two other teachers, one of whom is a survivor of the Parkland tragedy, and the other is a New York City activist teacher. And the group chat looked like conversations you have with your family and friends after these heinous tragedies happen over and over. Like, why is this happening and why aren't we hearing from the teachers? And I mean, for their tragic, we didn't see one educator. It was just, it's the kind of the same profile, and we understand why. We can think we understand why, but we are on the front lines of this public health crisis, and we rarely, if ever, hear from us. So I just asked them, do you want to start a national organization for teachers, by teachers on this issue? And they said yes. And so that's what led to the launch of Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence. We call ourselves the bridge connecting the education space and gun violence prevention space. And we feel that both sides of that bridge really need to embrace educators into the movement. So we are dedicated to empowering educators to speak up on this issue in ways that are comfortable for them, and to empower educators to help navigate gun violence that lives in classrooms every day across this country, whether it's through a school shooting or a community shooting, which happens 57 times a day, average of 57 times a day in America. So we create webinars, we show up at our union conventions and conferences, and we talk about how to care for kids who've been impacted by gun violence, how to bond together with other educators and walk into your principal's office and ask that and talk about drills that haven't been performed in an ethical and trauma-informed way and things like that. So that's what here. Oh, and the most exciting thing is that I'm taking a leave of absence this year to focus on Teachers Unify full time because as Milan mentioned earlier, you can't, if you want a seat at the table, you have to be available to be at the seat at the table. And I think that's part of why educators have not been brought into the movement. But I was talking with one lieutenant governor once at a summit on gun violence prevention, and he said, how come I never hear from teachers? I was like, they're teaching, but get them a sub and they'll come to your meeting. So there are ways to bring us in, and we will continue working on those ways. Thank you so much. And I think it's on to the next person. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Abby. I mean, first of all, I'm so sorry that you had to go through what you went through at Sandy Hook. I can't imagine what that must be like in, as a teacher, as an educator, having to fear for your students, and then 12 years later, we're sitting here having the same conversations. And the same teachers and educators are sending the same text to their other faculty mentors, and it's just in that sense, it's very disheartening. But I think it's really honorable that you've continued and persisted with your advocacy. And I really do think it does matter. I mean, even for me at UT, over the last decade, the Texas legislature has passed some um, more reckless firearm laws relating to campus carry and firearms on school grounds. And we saw an outpouring of resistance from educators and teachers, and there was a palpable effect on the quality of the education and the quality of the safety of UT. And so, just for anyone listening, like educators play so much more of an impact than we might just think. And it's not just in the advocacy space. It's like you mentioned, like if you want to create advocacy, like you have to take time off yourself. And so it really does affect a lot. So it's really important to have educators at the table, but also to listen to them as a primary resource. But we really appreciate you talking, and encourage everybody to support the work of Teachers Unify and other gun violence prevention work around school safety. Next, we wanted to get perspective from a student. So another student at UT actually, and it'll be Sneha Kesavan. She's a senior at UT, majoring in neuroscience and also in the Plant 2 program. And what Sneha mentioned is that after a mass shooting affected her hometown of Odessa, she founded a Students Demand Action chapter at UT. And she's really passionate about mobilizing the healthcare and STEM communities and gun violence prevention. She also serves on the Team Enough Executive Council through the Brady Center. So excited to hear from Sneha. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Milan. So yeah, I'm Sneha Casefin, and as you mentioned, I'm a senior at UT, so almost on my way out. But before I left, I really thought that it was like there was no space for gun violence prevention on campus. You know, we are a campus carry campus, and there wasn't any voices on the issue in general, like nonpartisan, just like what is this issue mean to students? And after taking a gun violence class on campus through the Plant 2 Honors Program, that the pleasure of learning from Nicole in that class as well, just so many experiences in my life, that really propelled me to make that space on campus. And it's just been an honor to learn from students on how violence has affected them. And that story is really omnipresent. And for me, that story really comes from a false alarm in my own high school. We had clear backpacks, but a gun had passed through the campus. And so when another student I saw that, they pulled the fire alarm and like nobody really knew what happened because everyone just like went through a fire drill, but it was like a fire alarm on campus. And so just like thankfully like nobody was hurt, but just like going through that and being like, okay, nobody knows like how to stop like a firearm getting onto campus, and clearly clear backpacks were not the solution. And then after that, Odessa is a really small town, and so there's only one street on our town that's like really busy. And so the high school's on that same street. And a perpetrator had went through like a drive-by shooting. He had like hijacked a mail van, and then went on that van and went through this busiest street in our little town and just shot through windows. And so he had shot through the high school that was on the street as well. And so that was just, like losing students who like were in my building and in like restaurants on that same street really just made it even more into perspective that this isn't like, even though it's not like in my school, it's still all around us and still something that affects so many people everywhere, every day. And so yeah, that's just a little bit about like why like this is something that really means so much to me. And for me, like just like at UT Austin, uh Student Submitted Action was sort of just my outlet and to educate, to bring more awareness, and to activate other students on this issue and any other issue that like, they're really passionate about. I think just like increasing civic engagement in general has been something that in youth we feel a little bit jaded about the process. We have really like grown into politics like during the 2016 election, the 2020 election. It's just really been a polarizing environment as a youth, and we don't know like what side to take, or should we even take a side, or it's like why are there sides? And so just so many questions, and just making that effort to like even though it's really confusing, like your voice still matters, and we can like wade through the waters and figure out a way together to through this process. And so for me, like voter registration drives on campus through SDA has really been so inspiring to hear what other people think about voting and why like voting is so important and on gun violence prevention and on every other issue that people are passionate about. And so that's really been just currently what I'm like really working on as the registration deadline is next Monday. And just so even when they come to my like table, like come and talk about like not only voting, but like wow, they could just tell me like there's their own story, and I feel like I've heard that like dozens and dozens of times of how guns and gun violence has affected them, and um So yeah, just like I really feel for those stories, and I feel like that's like really why I continue to do this work because I never stop hearing the stories. And so um in the future, we plan to host like general meetings, like continue to keep people activated and educated, guest speakers and teach-ins on this issue as well. And we're currently working on a project with Delmed pediatricians to host a gun lock drive, as you know, emergency and pediatric physicians are have been the most activated due to their proximity to treating victims of school shootings. And so just ensuring that their voices and other voices of STEM community is like personally like my passion topic in this issue. And just, you know, as Abby had mentioned, just mitigating the public crisis that it is. It's just continuing to uplift that narrative and to make it more just transparent and visible for everyone. And so yeah, just like for me, uh, and supporting this work is really, I feel like uh, just like trusting in students' voices when like this is something that like, even if it hasn't happened on their campus, God forbid, like it's still something that people like we think about all the time. And like I think that's like not really something like you don't need to have a sad story to be up to be involved in this movement. And I really wouldn't want everyone to have that sad story. And so, you know, um I think just like in school, I feel like we just really, for me, it was like just making sure there is like an environment where everyone like can talk to each other and we're just all like being like a unified per community. I feel like that's what really got through, like really, what my high school really wanted to put together like after what happened. But I feel like as Milan mentioned earlier, being proactive rather than reactive, and so having that already beforehand would have definitely just like really like made an impact on my campus as well. And I'm sure that will be something that a lot of other campuses will continue to build and grow in. So I'm just excited for everything. You know, still like you know this issue is still really hard to talk about a lot of times, but it's still like a really exciting thing. And to just really be like optimistic about the future. And and I really hope that UT and Students in Action here lives beyond me. And so, yeah, I'm just excited to see where it goes.
Thank you so much, Sneha. And I mean, I think what you kind of mentioned at the end is the optimism. Like I talked a little bit how it's so disheartening to see in some ways we've regressed, but there's a lot of optimism to go around too. Like I, you know, we go to the same university, and so I can see also at on this like main road we have called Speedway. It's like every single day there's throngs of people signing up to vote, to register to vote, and people who they recognize and they understand that like their safety at school really matters, and they do care about it, and there is an avenue for them to explore, to help, you know, to them at least ensure that is their safety needs are met. And so seeing the massive numbers of people and the outpouring of support that we've gotten for voter registration, has been really heartwarming, and really instills me with a sense of optimism. And so I, you know, like this conversation should also be, you know, more positive too, because we have a lot to look forward to and a lot to hope for. But thank you so much, Sneha, for everything you do at UT. One of the other educators, or one of the other experts on education that we wanted to talk to was also Carrie Griffith. And so Carrie Griffith is the policy specialist for the Texas State Teachers Association, advocating for public education and school safety. With a background as a classroom teacher and as an educator, and an instructional coach, she holds multiple degrees in education and policy from UT Austin and is mother of three daughters in Texas public schools. So we're excited to hear from Carrie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Milan, and thank you, Texas Gun Sense, for inviting me. And I'm, honored to be among all of the people on this panel and to hear everyone's story. And I want to first just begin by acknowledging the survivors of gun violence who are committing themselves to this work, because it's hard anyway, but it's especially hard as a survivor. And my professional advocacy related to this issue is just on behalf of TSTA members and students in public schools. But something I don't typically share is that I'm also a survivor. My mom was actually on those Odessa roads at the time of that shooting, and then I lost my brother to suicide naturally, really tragically. And so these conversations resonate in a personal way for me. But I just think it's really important to acknowledge the courageous determination of survivors who are working in memory of their loved ones to save other people's children. So a priority, TSTA is a state affiliate of the National Education Association, and we, advocate for public schools and school teachers on all the issues of education. But school safety is something certainly very important to NEA and TSTA both. And so, just generally speaking, we understand and argue for a comprehensive and multi-pronged approach to school safety, which includes access to mental health care services and providing a safe and secure learning environment for all students, and I'll talk about both of those, but then also taking meaningful action on gun violence prevention. And we, TSDA partners with Texas Gun Sense and other experts in around sort of the issues, and we kind of defer to them on defining what meaningful action means because they are the experts, but we certainly work to activate members and echo that message. But the first two components I'll speak sort of in greater detail. So increasing access to mental health and providing safe and secure learning environments. So, I want to make clear that we don't, I understand and we acknowledge that gun deaths aren't uniquely the result of unaddressed mental health challenges. We know that under-resourced schools and limited access to mental health professionals places an added stress on the crisis. Billions in Texas and nationally are misspent on security upgrades and police, and that instead could be used on, counselors and psychologists and social workers. And studies consistently rank Texas near the bottom in terms of policies and laws that support mental health professionals in schools. So some really tired statistics that allied organizations tout in hearing after hearing after hearing. I'm just going to give them to you again because they're shocking, but until we don't need to say it anymore, we're just going to keep saying it. So Texas has one school counselor for every 423 students, and the recommended ratio is 1 to 250. Texas has one school psychologist for every 5,000 students, and the recommended ratio is 1 to 500. And the arguably most shocking one is that Texas has one school social worker for every 13,604 students, and the recommended ratio is 1 to 250. So the reason for this is obviously because it costs money, and we know that the Texas legislature and our governor aren't fond of giving money to schools. So an easy alternative that we often see coming through legislation is that legislators will sort of pass laws that require training teachers. And it doesn't cost anything. It's, the fiscal note is zero. And then they can say to their constituency, well, I passed legislation that is increasing school mental health. But of course, our classroom teachers are there to teach. They're essential components and comprehensive systems of mental health, but they should not be the front line. They're not mental health professionals, and the only thing that they really need to know is mental health first aid and when to call for help. But of course, it's important that schools have someone that they can call. And so that's the piece that costs money, and that's where we're falling short in Texas. And okay, yeah, sorry, lost track of that. But and then the safe and secure learning environment. So one sort of component in our advocacy work in this area is active shooter drills. So we certainly weigh in on emergency drills, especially active shooter drills. We were really pleased to see the recent executive order that was stated to accelerate improving school-based active shooter drills. Many of the recommendations developed are actually in concert with and support with NEA. We work closely with the Biden administration, and so TSCA, we were really pleased to see aspects of that executive order. So we, to be clear, we support readying schools for unexpected emergencies. That's really important that students and teachers have, an understanding of what to do. And we're not categorically opposed to active shooter drills. We believe that it should be a local decision and, decided by a democratically elected school board and community weigh-in. But if they are, if it is decided sort of, democratically that active shooter drill should be in a community, we want to ensure that they're age and developmentally appropriate, that they're implemented with guidance from parents, educators, and school-based mental health professionals. And then we also advocate for the right of we advocate for advance notice and the right of students and educators to opt out of these drills. But it's important, of course, to say that the fact remains that if students must use what they've learned in a drill, then we as a society have already failed. So whatever's decided, we have to sort of, like Nicole always says, like we have to really kind of talk about the elephant in the room here. Okay, and then another issue in this area is just kind of this issue of arming teachers. Sorry, so TSTA and NEA were vehemently opposed to arming teachers as an avenue to secure schools. There was a national NEA survey that found that 82% of teachers oppose or would not want to carry a gun in school, and 61% of our national members nationally who are gun owners oppose arming teachers. So this isn't a political issue. Again, it just seems to be more of what educators see as a common sense issue. There are laws in Texas. There are two laws, the school martial law and the school guardian law, which are kind of, there's some nuances and differences between the two, but basically the two together permit school employees and or community members to carry weapons on school grounds with minimal training relative to peace officers. So, of course, putting more guns in schools not only creates an unsafe environment, but it communicates to students that they're unsafe. And, a core job of a teacher, a foundational job of a teacher is to ensure trusting relationship with students, and, having a school full of guns and teachers interferes with this, and teachers with guns interferes with this objective. There was legislation passed this most recent session, House Bill 3, that made it a mandate that an armed security guard be present on every campus in the state of Texas. And in that law, and so that costs about $85,000 per security guard. So it's costly if you multiply that by the number of campuses in Texas. And it's a waste of money. We've run a few numbers. Every district's different, but if you compare the cost of that to a potential a potential pay raise for teachers, we're looking at about $3,000 raise for teachers that they're being forced by mandate to redirect towards arming, having guns on campus. So because districts just simply don't have the money and they can't afford that, there's a provision in the law where they can, instead of having a trained security officer, they can use the guardian or marshal. And so there's strict sanctions for non-compliance in the law. And in the, appetite for school takeover, and districts have no money, and there's this heavy appetite for school takeover, and there are sanctions threatening takeover for not complying with this law. So what's happening is districts, even the ones that don't want to do this, are arming teachers. It's de facto become a requirement. So let me think about what I was going to say there. Anyway, yeah, it's a problem, and we don't want our teachers to be carrying guns. And then the final question that I was asked to speak to is just how can you support our efforts? Well, attending sessions like these and actively listening to survivors and educators and experts on the issue is a civic, a responsible civic way to respond to this crisis. and then, vote, and you have to pay attention to what the politicians are doing and what they're saying. And we have to demand that our elected officials pass legislation and pass laws that keep schools safe. Um, Not pretend to solve this problem with meaningless trainings for teachers, not to ignore the fact that making it so easy to get guns in the hands of people who shouldn't have access to guns isn't at the core of this problem. Um, and yeah, I think that I don't I, there were a lot of complicated reasons related to the death of my brother, and I don't know that he would be here today if things were better. But I do know that he would have had a better chance if there were some mental health supports for him when he was younger, and if he didn't, you know, wasn't so easily able to access a gun, he would have had a better chance. So I just appreciate everyone's work and in this, and we'll keep fighting.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm very sorry about your experiences with your family. Um, it's just undeniably true that access to firearms increases the risk of an injury or a death via firearm, whether that's on an individual level or in schools. There's a plethora of data that indicates that arming teachers and increasing the amount of firearms in schools ultimately creates a less safe environment. Even when there is a shooting in those cases, it creates a less safe environment. Um, and so I really appreciate you speaking to that, and I appreciate you being here to talk about your experiences as well. Finally, we wanted to talk to Sami Beg. Sami Beg is a freshman at Rice University, and he joined March for Our Lives Houston in 2021. He co-authored the Houston Policy Plan and served on the Harris County Safe Schools Commission. And Sami also helped draft HB 2076, targeting domestic violence firearm loopholes. So he's done a lot of that legislative work as well, and he's now currently studying social policy to address gun violence. So I'm going to turn it over, Sami. Thank you for being here, and excited to hear from you.
No, thank you for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to speak to y'all's events, and I love hearing from y'all's advocates. So, hi y'all, I'm Sami. Okay, so I have a couple of points. So, um, I started off as a Giffords Courage Fellow this year, and I think key takeaways from that is that like there was a very important national narrative of gun violence, and young people are situated in this conversation and are able to make an impact not only on the national level but also on the local level. And I think like my project personally for Giffords was working with social media and making sure that student narratives are platformed on social media accounts. So I was able to work with March for Our Lives, and we were able to talk about safe storage, and we were able to talk about arming teachers. And I think the most important aspect of that was that when you combine narrative and you combine data, those are very convincing for people who might not be inclined to support your policy measures. Students don't necessarily need a credential in order to be able to talk about the issues that they face on a daily basis. So when it comes to having teachers that are armed, how do students feel about that? Having a real perspective and being able to communicate that, I think as a young person really empowers you to be able to talk about policy issues. And it can be very convincing for legislators that might not be inclined to agreeing with you in the first place. So I think that is one way that young people can really approach the issue of gun violence, is working um, not only by inserting data-driven like analysis into their narratives, but just like being able to communicate those narratives to people who don't agree with you. And then what else? So at Giffords, I think some important things about like gun violence on the national level is that there's certain bills that we worked on, we were able to lobby in June. And I think key takeaways from our lobby day was making sure that we don't necessarily approach the punitive carceral system whenever we're talking about gun violence prevention measures. Um, there is a large willingness to work through punitive measures or work through the carceral system or work with law enforcement um, to make schools feel safer. But in reality, we end up removing children from their communities that are their support networks. So how can we work through systems that don't involve the carceral state, right? So we were thinking about cultural shifts. So sometimes guns are marketed to students through through like media. So how do we make sure that there's like a responsible way to communicate those standards to people who create media and are guns being marketed to children, and then also working on hospital violence intervention programs. So making sure that students who are exposed to gun violence on a daily basis are able to be removed from those like removed from dangerous environments, and they're given support networks so that they aren't repeatedly put into the healthcare system. And I think a lot of times like it's easy to view gun violence as like a isolated issue, but in reality it's increasingly intersectional. um Thinking about how young people are impacted by food scarcity, by household insecurity, by domestic violence, all of those play a very important role when discussing student narratives. And I think that was something that I learned, especially at Giffords. And one thing that we're doing on the local level that I think is really important, especially in Texas, is the Harris County Safe Schools Commission. So I started that in, well, I didn't start it, but I was part of it in my sophomore year of high school. And I worked with Marginalized Houston to make sure that there was at least a student representative on that board. So um, that was founded after the Uvalde shooting. And so there's a lot of push for certain initiatives to take place in that commission or be supported by that commission. And as a student member, I was there to say, you know what? No, this is not right. Like for example, there was a huge push to have um, an increase in SROs, and there was a conversation about arming teachers, and I was there and be like, no, we cannot do that. Unfortunately, that is the current reality that we live in, but having student representatives there was super important. So the commission just got extended unanimously. So part of our, how do you say, I guess rules, or like just like the not the agenda, but like part of the rules and structure of the government commission is including two student representatives from Harris County. So I personally made sure that there were two students who were pulled from the public school system and were able to attend these meetings and hear from us and be able to like actually advise teachers, officers on this commission. And I think that's extremely important because um, whenever we like think about who is consulted in school safety issues, it's very easy to be like, oh, let's talk to SROs, let's talk to law enforcement, let's talk to like everyone but people who live at the system that they have to like deal with. You know what I mean? Students are stakeholders, and very rarely are they consulted. They are not voters, but they are faced with gun violence and the issues that gun violence has on a daily basis. So it's very important that like we were able to have those perspectives in there. And we are just now we were literally looking over applications. So we're just now about to have two students on the commission for the first time. Yes. And then, sorry, I have some points that I'm going through. And then, yeah, like Carrie mentioned also, um, the issue with like HB3 and having this unfunded mandate um, of having increased SROs and armed presences on campus is extremely problematic because we are cutting away from potential counselors, potential child psychiatrists, psychologists, like all those people that could be preventing violence on a daily basis are actually working to develop a stronger support network for students are markedly ignored. And instead, we're able to default to the system where we're having more guns on campus. So we're not actually addressing the root cause of the issue, but we're adjusting symptoms of the issue. And I think the only way to really change that is to make sure that students are using their narratives and they're heard from, and not just like heard from, but listened to when it comes to this issue, especially coming to the next Texas legislature. And I'm sure that if legislative advocacy opportunities are expanded to students, then they'll be able to use their voices in order to make this change.
Thank you so much, Tommy. I mean, I think like me, you, Sneha, so many others are like walking, living evidence of the fact that yes, students are stakeholders, but when we are used as stakeholders and when we're listened to, we really can affect a tangible policy, and we can create safer environments that are better for schools and better for students, because as Abby mentioned, from an educator's perspective, from a student's perspective, we also know best. Like what's best for us. And I think that's generally how we approach politics in general. But for some reason, sometimes there can be a disconnect in the gun violence prevention conversation. So I think it's important for us to continue our advocacy to um, put pressure on lawmakers to understand that, yes, some of us might not be of voting age when we're in high school, but we still have strong stake in well, the future of this country. So I really appreciate you speaking about that, Sami, and for all the work that you've done. What we want to do now is, first of all, thank all the speakers for all their words and all the points and the importance of everything that they talked about. But we wanted to open up the floor to Q&A from the audience for anyone for through the chat or raising your hands. We just want to kind of facilitate a discussion if anybody had any questions for any of the panelists. So yeah, I'll open the floor if anyone wants to raise their hand or has any questions, you can just drop it in the chat.
Hey, this is Dana Halp from San Antonio. I am really fairly obsessed with Sami's being involved in a Safe Schools Commission, and I think we should have it in all of the larger cities. I think it would be a really great opportunity for student leadership. And I wonder, Nicole and team at Texas Gun Sense, if you guys want to put your thinking cap on about it and work with through the coalition to develop more youth leadership. I don't mean to put anyone on the spot. I'm just putting it out there, and anybody can take a stab at continuing this conversation or asking a different question. I'm not expecting like an immediate giant response.
You're speaking our language, Dana. Garrett has been working on that. And so I'm thrilled that you're excited about it. We are also excited about it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much just because we're still in the planning process, but the coalition will definitely be the first to know. But we're definitely getting out some youth engagement programming and trying to set up some kind of leadership tracks for both within Texas Gun Sense and also just with the movement overall to make sure that we're setting folks up to have youth voices at the table and be involved at the local level and the state level here.
Well, and not just that, but with the adult leaders and all of the organizations as well, so they can, because theoretically, at least, they're going to county commissioner meetings at the city council, et cetera. And so, it's just like expanding the coalition, drawing the connections, helping everybody realize that we all need to do 200 times more than we're already doing.
Absolutely.
Sorry, just gonna take a couple more seconds, see if anyone else had any other questions for any of the panelists or for TGS as well. All right. Well, we appreciate all the speakers and all the participants. Thank you for being here and kind of sharing this conversation with us. and listening to the speakers and their unique perspectives as educators and as experts and also as students, and experts in their own right, about the evolving dynamic around gun violence in schools. And so I kind of want to conclude with a call to action for everyone who's on the call. Please subscribe to the Texas Gun Sense newsletter for updates, but also as well to Teachers Unified, to Giffords, to Team Enough, TSTA. Look out for UT's SDA page. We'll link all of those in a follow-up email to you attendees in a few days. Also, contact your lawmakers to support safe storage and school safety legislation, and encourage people to advocate using tools like our Safe Storage Toolkit, which Garrett is going to drop in the chat here. And then going forward into the future, mark your calendars for Advocacy Day, Gun Violence Prevention Advocacy Day in 2025. It's going to be February 27th. 2025. We'll be gathering as many GVP advocates as we can to talk to lawmakers and staffers, showing legislators that Texans support common sense gun safety and school safety measures. And so that day is really powerful. It's really impactful, I think, very transformative. There's a sea of advocates and allies that walk through the Capitol and walk through Austin. And I think it's being in that environment. There's a certain aura about it that really makes the work that we do feel very valuable and very important. So, but those are kind of the things I want to conclude on. I wanted to pass it over to Laura now, who's going to talk a little bit about TGS's movement and how you can support us.
Hey, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I'm so inspired and honored to be here. Yes, we are gearing up for the next session, which will be starting way too soon. I put a link to our donate page in the chat. That's one of the many ways that you can be involved. I'm sorry about the barking. My dogs are cheering us on. So texasgunsense.org is our website, txgunsense.org, and our donate page is just /donate. And we are so pleased and honored that y'all joined us tonight, and we hope to see you at the Capitol in February. And thank you again so much for being here.
Yes, thank you all. Thanks, Laura. The Advocacy Day link is in the chat too, so that you can sign up now, secure your spot. I really appreciate our speakers. You guys were incredible, really powerful stories and really important work.
Thanks, everyone.
Looking forward to more partnership. Thank you guys for listening in tonight.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.